Anyway, this presentation today is going to show us kind of the work you should be doing before starting a business. You can also do this kind of approach as you prepare to purchase a business, or even if you are starting a new product line. Back in the day, probably 5 years ago, when the class size was smaller, I would break the class into groups of 3 to 5 people, and their task was during the semester to develop a business. They didn't actually have to go into business, although some did. Evaluate the product, the production methods, the market, the distribution channels, the pricing, the costs, everything it would take to actually present their business idea to a group of investors. Think about it as my version of Shark Tank. This happens still all the time. I think you may have heard of Edson, EDSON, and the program that they set up for entrepreneurs on campus to try to compete for funding. And over the years, the groups that had developed business plans did things as simple or easy to understand as shoelaces that didn't loosen. That was led by a person who had come back from active duty and was always having to retie his boots, to hookahs. At the time, everybody wanted to be in a hookah bar, and so this was a hookah starting kit. We had a pair of kids that were working on lighter than air transport as a method of carrying mobile minis or truck trailers into remote areas. In fact, that team went on to compete for seed money at MIT and came in second. First place got $750,000 of seed money to actually start their business. These two came in second, and then the next semester kind of parted ways and never did anything with it. But it was a pretty interesting proposal. We've got one team that developed a product to help people in some third world countries carry roll a drum down to the water, fill it with water, and be able to roll it back. But during the time it was being rolled back, it was continuously passed through filters and membranes so that it would decontaminate the water and make it usable for human consumption. They actually were written up in a couple places, and they actually did put this business into work and have done okay with it, at least the last time I knew. So it was always interesting to see what people came up with to develop their product and the way they went about assessing the market. Since classes got so big, it's not the kind of thing I can manage. I would usually take 2 and sometimes 3 days to let all the teams present. But when classes got up above 80 students, then it was starting to be 4 and 5 days, and that didn't make sense to me for the materials that we would have to leave uncovered during the semester. It was always fun. Students would ask the nastiest questions, and when they did, boy, when it was their turn to present, it probably didn't go well. So this is an example of a project that I put together to use to teach them how to do this whole task, taking the different aspects of what we've covered during the semester and putting them to actual use. So in my case, my project, I decided to name it Studio Tune, and with the company slogan of providing perfect pitch for your guitar. Now, I'm personally not a guitarist, but that didn't matter because I could conceive of a product that could be used by guitarists from brand new through very skilled. And I can work through the design, development, costing, pricing, marketing, patents, etc. for this type of product. So in the case of the Studio Tune, the product itself is an accessory that automatically tunes the guitar when it is turned on. It is attached to the guitar as opposed to you tuning it by hand. And I would market this to two sets of people. First of all, I would market this to the manufacturers of guitars, of which there are many, in the hopes that they would offer it as an option on their product to their customer base. And second, I would market it to guitarists in the world who already had guitars and therefore might consider putting this onto their guitar as an accessory. I'm always very conservative when evaluating a business. And when I look at just 1% of the market within the guitar world, I determined that Studio Tune could be applied to 1,900 new guitars every year. And if you could retrofit, if you convince someone to retrofit, there's another 208 plus thousand existing guitars to retrofit. And that's just 1% of the potential market. So it's not a very pie in the sky look at what potential is. It's a very realistic, you can do this kind of estimate. As I work through the financials, it appeared that if I took $150,000 as startup money, by the end of the third year, it had the potential for earning almost $600,000 on sales of 1.8 million. In a business plan, we're always thinking and presenting what's in it for me. Why would someone invest in your business? So my business presentation here starts out with what the product is and what the potential is. If you're writing a business plan, it's basically the first half a page of your business plan, trying to get people's attention, trying to get them to look beyond and say, hey, maybe there's some interest here. So with a $150,000 investment, which isn't very much, and the potential for $600,000 income by the third year, that's something that would attract attention. But how do you do this? Well, first of all, we have to evaluate the market. And I told you that there was 1,900 new guitars and 208,000 existing guitars. And I'm going to look at individual guitarists as well as the guitar manufacturers. At the time, there were 128 guitar manufacturers, and they sold 70,000 acoustic guitars that cost more than $500, and they sold 122,000 electric guitars over $600. I know that my product, while it could be applied to a $30 Walmart guitar, that wasn't my target market. I just wanted to look at a market where the value of the guitar would be enhanced by this accessory, and that it was a serious guitarist. Similarly, when I look at the number of guitars that were sold in the 10 years prior, there's almost 1 million new guitars that were sold in the 10 prior years. So there are a lot of market potential. Remember, I only said I wanted to get through 1% of this market. So you can see the top section, 192,000, turns into 1,900 guitars. And the individual guitars, that 20 million, turns into 208,000 potential clients. The thing that made me feel even better about this opportunity is that there was a survey just freshly out at the time that showed that 70% of guitar owners spent $500 or more on instruments or accessories the prior year. And even more to my liking is they plan to do it again the next year. So we already have people that are spending money on their craft, have spent money, can spend money, will spend money. And that is a good feature of a target market. That leaves me to the point of, well, I kind of have to develop this product, figure out how much it costs, figure out how much I have to sell it for, compare it to existing products. So we'll start at the development process. Now, it's been a really, really long time since I tuned a guitar. I know how to do it. I probably would be very bad at it, but understanding what that takes is part of the process here, because my goal is to develop an electronic system that listens to the guitar and takes action to tune it. So once I know how to listen to the guitar, I can develop an electronic circuit, a printed circuit board, a chip, whatever it turns out to be, that will take in this information, as in the sound that strings are making, and turn that into the action of tightening or loosening strings, therefore the electromechanical interface. So I know that these kinds of things exist, but in this configuration, what will I have to do? I also know that I'm a chemical engineer and not an electrical engineer. And while I do have a good experience with electronic components, I'm kind of going to need to know how to select the correct components to develop this product. So right away, we're looking at things that I will need help with, and that's perfectly appropriate in this business plan. Your model ultimately includes getting additional help and getting additional information to make your business work. Having as much experience as I did in production and looking at what this product was, I knew I'd need computers for the development and testing of the product. I'd need some equipment to do the production, and some equipment to do inspection. Do I need to know today specifically which optical comparator I need or which lathe I need? No, I don't need to do that right now. I need to know that it exists and how it impacts my production, because that's going to impact my costs. When I move forward, I would be lying to you if I told you, well, I know exactly how they design a guitar. I know why they use the thin section of the neck. I know why they use the bridges and whatnot. Gee, you can tell. I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. But I know there's people out there that do know. And the only way I'm going to be successful is if I gain some knowledge of the design of the guitar, because ultimately I need to develop a product that fits onto a myriad of actual guitars and does it in a way that is both appealing visually and is effective for the task it's designed to do. I know that guitars are made of a number of different materials. You obviously see wood guitars, but you see metal in them, and you see certain lacquers and all of the electronics, especially on the electric guitars. Knowing what the materials are being used would allow me to design, once again, not just for aesthetics, but for avoidance of problems down the road. Certainly, I'm going to have to learn enough about servo motors and electronics and work with somebody for the circuit design before we're done. I know what those things are, but that's not my core strength, so it's not the kind of thing that I would try to do alone. This is information that ultimately we're going to need in order to move forward. Starting to know what we need, we have to start to figure out where to get it. So there are a number of companies locally, around the country, around the world, that will do electronic design and test, so you can specify what you want this product to do, work with them to develop the electronics, for example, have them build those prototypes and test them until the point where you can go into production. It's critical in that discussion to talk about non-disclosure agreements so that you don't give away the store or your idea to someone who might make it instead of you because you didn't approach it correctly. Now, my history is in electronic assembly, so I don't have any problem doing that myself, but at the same time, there are a ton of companies in the Phoenix market and pretty much any market that will do printed circuit assembly through hole or surface mount. They'll help you make cable harnesses, everything you need. So you can take your design that you've worked on and bring it to somebody to build, and they'll do it. So you're able to identify those sources. Because I anticipate doing a fair amount of work in wood, because the common material in guitars is wood. I have some skills in woodwork, but there are very much many more talented people than me. So knowing who to go to for woodwork help is quite important for me. Things I know I'm going to need: perhaps before or after the design is done, it doesn't matter yet, I know I'm going to need the electronics to actually listen and help tune a guitar. And I'm going to start to cost those out. So my estimate of $8 for electronics that will help me to listen to the sound and at least give me the signal out that will start to mechanically adjust the key pegs. I'm saying that's an $8 estimate. You wonder what makes me think that? When I look at products at retail and I see a product that does electronically the task that I intend to do, I can assume if I find that product for $20 at retail, and this would be one of those Korg tuners that listens and tells you if it is or if it is not in tune, then I'm pretty sure that I can purchase it at wholesale or build it at product cost for 40% or less than retail. That's just experience seeing that when I sell something to a lighting showroom, that lighting showroom about doubles the price they sell to somebody at retail. If you look at the chain of manufacturer to distributor to a retail organization, 40% retail cost is a reasonable expectation. So something that Guitar Center sells for $20, they probably bought for 10. If they bought it for 10 and there was a middleman, he probably made 20% on the manufacturer. So there's an $8 cost. That's actually a fairly comfortable way to assess costs without doing a tremendous amount of homework. When I apply that same logic to servo controls, I can see that I can buy servo controllers for $29 on a Google search at retail. So I should be able to find the manufacturer of that or build it myself for about $13. When I say build it myself, not everything will make sense to you to build yourself, but it is certainly something that is plausible. If someone can build it, you can build it. The question you will have is, should you build it or should you buy it? Apply that same to the servo motors. They're $23 at hobby engineering retail. So I've got a little bit over $9 for the servo motors. So there are some of my major costs associated with the components needed. And this is part of the process of figuring out how much will it cost to make, how much do I have to sell it for, and will I find somebody to buy it at that price. Continue down. I know this is likely to be housed in a wooden enclosure because aesthetically it will blend well with the guitar. And I know that things like the Gibsons are made with mahogany. So if I take the mahogany and I look at the current cost of mahogany at $15 a board foot, and I just assess how much of it I'm going to need, there's another $3.75 worth of wood, not done wood, just physically wood. And it'll probably cost me about $5 worth of labor to take that board mahogany in board form and create a box suitable to house the components. One of the more expensive things about woodwork I've learned is that until you put a very nice finish on it, it might as well be pine. So the wood finish effort is actually a fairly steep component of cost in this case. I'm going to need screws, fasteners, nuts, bolts, whatever. So I put in 50 cents worth of hardware for my product. And I figured it was going to take about $10 worth of assembly and test labor to build it. Will yours be more? Will yours be less? Of course. But this is an assessment on my part on how much time it will take and how much money it will take. I also know that some of my product is going to go full retail. So if I'm going to sell this product at someplace like Guitar Center or Best Buy or in a Walmart, I'm going to expect to spend a couple dollars to get a box that will grab people's attention. Once again, these are costs associated with building this product. We've talked in the past about variable costs. We also identified them as direct costs. These are the costs that go up with increased amount of production. So when I look at the variable costs here, the electronics, the controller, the motor, etc., each one of these Studio Tune products is going to consume about $54 worth of labor and materials. If I build one, it's $54. If I build two, it's $108, etc., etc. These are just the material needs. And if we build one, it's again 54, 10 is 540, 1,000, 54,000. You're going to go ahead and have a straight line impact on your overall costs based on how many you're making. So it's an easy item to understand, but it is impactful because what it's going to do when we get through and figure out how much to charge people, it's the variable costs plus the overhead costs that we really have to concern ourselves with. When you're thinking about your new business, you're going to think about the costs to actually run it. It's not like you're going to build studio tunes in the public park. You might build a couple in your garage, but you're not going to build a big business in a garage if you're going to hire people. So we have to start thinking about overhead costs, that money that's fixed every month that you need to go ahead and develop this business. So we'll start with something as straightforward as rent. $4,000 a month is probably the equivalent to 6,000 square feet, maybe 7,000 square feet in the Phoenix market, that you could probably have 15 maybe employees working in there, have enough inventory and enough room to move around. So in this business, I've decided that we're going to use that much space, and rent is going to be about $4,000 a month. One of the most unfortunate things you're going to learn about utilities in a business perspective is that you're going to spend more money than you do at your house. If you turn off your lights at your house, you probably can reduce your electric bill. It doesn't work quite as well in a commercial environment because it seems like the utilities you pay is a combination of the electricity used and then this little thing called delivery charge. So even if I turn off all my lights for a month, okay, maybe I can get the utilities down to $800, but it won't go to zero. So $1,000 is about right for that size facility. Mine in Casa Grande is running about $1,600 a month. Up in Phoenix, I vacillate between $1,100 and $1,300 a month. That's with kilns and lights and everything. You probably don't want to do this for free. So I budgeted a meager salary. As an owner, I want to pay myself something consistently. It's better for your business value. It's better for your personal situation too. But I'm assuming that, we'll pay ourselves some little bit. What's that? $48,000 a year. It's not a lot, but as the owner, you probably are sitting in a position to benefit from the net income at the end of the year. And quite frankly, at the end of every month or quarter, you could be giving yourself a bonus as an owner. But you always want to plan on someone else running it for you. Now, would somebody else accept the responsibility for $4,000 a month? Who knows? But not paying yourself and trying to sell a business won't end up benefiting you very much. I do have to spend some money to let people know about this product. So I'm going to spend about $2,000 a month to let people know. Many times, companies spend a percentage of sales, and so that advertising value will increase over time. But, in a fresh startup business, you're just going to have to pick a number and start going with it. Later on, you may switch to a percentage of sales. It's not uncommon for people to reinvest, 8, 10, 12% of sales back into advertising so they can generate new sales. Let's face it, it doesn't matter where you live or what equipment you own. There's always some maintenance expense every month. It's unfortunate, but it's rare that you will get a lease for property where you aren't responsible for paying property taxes. And if you aren't paying property taxes, then guess what? Your rent is probably higher. So I'm looking at property taxes. Mine down in Casa Grande is $12,000 a year. And if you're not budgeting for the weird things, your forklift broke down, you've got to get somebody to come in and maintain it. Something happened to your power panel, you have to replace it. There's just so many different things that you wouldn't plan for that you have to deal with. Then I just leave in $1,000 of miscellaneous overhead costs. Some months you'll spend it, some months you won't. Some months you'll spend a lot more. Replacing an air conditioner, there's a $5,000 to $10,000 a month right there. So overall, on my budget, I'm looking at $13,000 a month every month. Those are fairly fixed fees. They really will stay pretty much the same month in and month out. I would say that your lease might have your rent going up 2% every year, but again, it has one discrete jump and then it's the same again for the next 12 months. the taxpayers in your neighborhood may decide that you need to pay more taxes. Mine in Casa Grande have doubled in the 17 years since we purchased the property, and I've never had the ability even to vote no, not to do it. So you have no control typically over property taxes and what the community spends. You just have to deal with it. So overall, this business looks like it's going to consume $13,000 a month plus all the direct or variable costs. So when I look at that, my total cost of production is the variable cost times the number of units we produced plus overhead. And if we take, for example, 250 units, I'm going to end up with the $106 per unit total cost, even though we said it only costs $54 per unit. It's an important number to understand because you're spreading that overhead cost over the number you produce. A slower month means it's $120 a unit. A busier month maybe means it's $90 per unit. So we're looking at total cost of production because it impacts how much we can sell this product for. If you just ran yourself a little spreadsheet and see at the quantities how much it costs per unit, $80 if I did 500, $60.50 if I did 2,000, $54.87 for 15,000. You see how rapidly that overhead expense gets consumed into the cost per unit as your unit count goes up. But you're in a new business and you're going to have to make some kind of guess as to how many you're going to make early on. Is it 250? Well, I'd bet you that early on it's not even 250. Is it 2,000? No, probably not yet. You may get there. You probably will get there. But you can't price these as if you're building 2,500 a month and find out that you're averaging 500 a month, because you're just going to continually lose money. Unless you are independently wealthy. And even then, it's not a good plan to price it based on an unrealistic quantity per month. So for my purposes, we'll come back to this, but for my purposes, we're going to end up using a 500 per month quantity and the costs associated with it when we are planning or forecasting our financials. I do have to look at what's out there that I compete with. I can compete with that very simple, very inexpensive. You'll find them for under $3. This pitch pipe. You blow into it, it makes the noise. You match that sound from the string to that C. That's very simple technology. Everybody who actually can tune a guitar knows how to use it. With this electronic tuner, it's going to listen and help you dial in probably a little better because it's not going to have the bias that your ears do. Maybe you're good at tuning a C, but you're not so good at tuning a G. I don't know. I know my ears wouldn't let me tune almost any of them. And then when I look at what I'm competing with, again, I've got that simple pitch pipe, the tuner, and then there's this thing called the String Master tuner, which does what I want my product to do, but it isn't something that's permanently attached. So you can see the range of costs that I will compete with. The String Master will listen and turn the pegs on your guitar but it only is active when you use it. Now, we go back to the market for a minute. In my target market with guitars over $500 each, 70,000 guitars were made. Electric guitars over 600, 122,000 were made. This is how I come up with the number of guitars that I potentially can apply my product to if I can convince the guitar manufacturers to offer it, and if I can convince existing guitar owners to buy it. Kind of a critical point in our forecasting. If I start out with wholesale pricing, remember that I did that 500 units per month, and that had a cost of $80 each and a 20% markup, so that I have 20% profit built in. Now I'm selling my product at $96 each to the manufacturers of the guitars and retailers who will further resell it with a suggested retail price of $149.95. It's more than any of the competing products, but it is doing more than those competing products also. I do know that as my production goes up, my costs per unit go down. So when I'm up to $2,500 a month, I have the opportunity to reduce the price to manufacturers and retailers and reduce the suggested retail value. And what that does is it makes it a little less appealing for a competitor to jump in and produce their version of my product. If I can take some of that profit margin and retain it, reduce it, then it makes it, again, less likely that someone tries to break into this market. How am I going to market? Well, for guitar manufacturers, I need to identify who the designers are and start to approach them. Maybe that $2,000 a month will include somebody making phone calls 4 hours a day, 5 days a week, just to try to identify and set up appointments with those designers. If I take that aspect and that I get a couple of guitar manufacturers to adopt my product, then I'm starting to make headway there. When I talk about actual guitar owners now, I need to think in terms of more traditional advertising. I can advertise in magazines that discuss guitars, technology. I can advertise on websites that guitarists frequent. And I can start a direct mail program to guitarists. A website company called Info USA gives you the ability to pick regions of the world, even down to zip codes, and pick demographics, find people who are interested in guitars, and they have lists and lists of people and businesses that you can market to. So for a couple $100 and postcards and stamps, you're going to hit thousands of people direct to their house, and you know that they are already interested in the technology. They're guitarists, so therefore they're interested in potentially your accessory. In that same way, you can specify only people who have, an income above X, Y, or Z, which to you means that they have discretionary income that they can, in fact, spend money on your product. Now, I have different distribution channels to work on. Remember, we talked about the marketing mixed, product, placement, price, and promotion. That's what these are. So distribution, in this case, if I'm going to sell to a guitar manufacturer, I'm going to throw the product in a plain brown box and mail it to them. They're going to then take it and attach it to a guitar that they further sell. I don't have to do anything fancy. I've sold them on the product. They don't need all the special marketing of the box. But when I'm selling it in retail stores, I definitely need a box that tells you what it is, tells you how it's used, whatever is needed to make that guitar owner who's walking down the aisle see it, think about it, buy it. Once again, I can advertise on the internet musical sites. I can create my own website. I can build interest in Pinterest or Instagram, all of that kind of stuff to make people aware of the product and give them the opportunity of going to one of the retailers that sell our product or one of the distribution channels that we manage to sell our product. It's obviously good if I can sell one through my retail site instead of a retail site where I'm having to give a discount to the store, for example. But I don't fool myself and think I can just sell by myself. What does it all mean? When I look at the financials, our first thing we're going to look at is our profit and loss statement, our income statement. And in the first year, I theorize that we sold just over 5,000 of these products with a total revenue of $500,000. It's straight line cost of sales. It was that $54 per unit. So your cost of sales at $298,000 and your gross profit of $200,000. So revenue minus cost of goods sold, total cost of sales, gives you what is known as the gross profit. Then when we take out those fixed or overhead expenses, that another $160,000, we end up with an income of $43,000 in the first year. Well, as the owner, if I paid myself $48,000 and then there's $43,000 of income, I have the ability to take that 43 and put it in my pocket, or take that 43 and reinvest it into the business. As we see, year 2 sales double, year 3 sales add another bunch, and so you can see that the revenue is going up, the cost of sales is going up accordingly, but the operating expense doesn't change quite as significantly. So very rapidly, our income at the end of the year is much more in year 3 than it was in year 1. We spent a fair amount of time in year 1 operating underwater, as in not making money, as in losing money, because we're developing, we're training people, we are just starting to approach the market, we're off to a slow start. Well, that's pretty small. If we look at that income statement on a month-by-month basis, it looks like I decided that the first month I'd make 10 products. The second month I'd make 50 products, and the third month I'd make 100 products. So you can see it's not rapidly increasing. I guess I should say, instead of make, I sold 10, 50, 100. And that's a function of, a growing awareness of this new product. At the end of the first month, it looks like we end up losing $13,000 on sales of 10 units. The next month, it's down to 11. We lost another 9. The fourth month, we're still losing money. It's not until the fifth month, until May, that our sales are high enough to turn a profit. Could it happen faster than that? Sure. Do you want to try to tell an investor it will absolutely happen faster than that? No, they're not stupid. You're not going to go from, I've never been in this business before, to I'm profitable in the first month. It just doesn't happen. There's no credibility. So looking at it realistically, it's going to take 5 or 6 months for this business to turn a profit. And even then, it's still going to be annually below, have a loss for several months to come when you look at the overall picture here. When we look at a balance sheet, we start to see the value of this company going up because the sales are going up, the inventories, we're going to maintain the same. But we're going to see that as our cash goes up from people buying more and more stuff, the assets go up, and so do the shareholder equity. Ultimately, this particular balance sheet shows that we borrowed, I don't know, 150,000, and it's showing how much we're having to pay back every month, things of that nature. Cash flow shows us kind of an interesting story. If we borrowed 150,000 to get this business rolling, we can see that at the beginning of January, or at the end of January, we had 20-something thousand dollars left in the bank, but we lost money that month. We lost money in February. We lost money in March. And then we start to turn a corner. So we see that our cash at the end of the third month is actually negative. So what that tells me is that 150,000 wasn't quite enough to start with. It wasn't far off. It's only $5,000 in the hole. It's probably just something that, you purchased something on your credit card instead of paying cash for it that month. But at the same time, this is telling you, do you have enough money to start with? And it tells me that, okay, maybe it was 155,000 if I wanted to cut it real tight, or maybe it would have been better off at, 200,000 and had a good buffer. But the cash flow statement is reinforcing your understanding of how solvent you are. So ultimately, in this business, I've set up a product, a market. We've looked at the customer. We've looked at the distribution channels. We've evaluated the cost to make it. I don't know if we've missed anything significant. I don't think we have. But we've gone ahead and started with an idea, developed that idea, developed that market, everything that you would need to actually move forward with this business if it looked promising to you, if you either had or could get the funding that you need. So my goal today was to talk about a business plan in action, show you a business plan in the form of a presentation. In this case, this business plan would probably be 10 or 15 pages long. What I talked about would have been written, but for the most part, it wouldn't go into so much significant detail for your potential investors that they would just decide based solely on what they've read. Your goal with a business plan and a presentation in order to gain investors is probably better off providing them enough information to whet their appetite, enough information to have them feel good about the work you've done, and enough information about what's in it for them that they come back and ask questions and potentially become an investor in your business. So we have 2 more lectures this semester. One is going to be on the financial ratios, which is how we evaluate the health of a company, the profitability of the company. So that, I think, is going to be on Monday. And on Wednesday, we're going to wrap it up with due diligence, which is the effort surrounding the purchase of a business, what you need to be concerned with, what kind of help there is, some video from some lawyers and some business brokers that will help us start to understand how you, one, evaluate, but 2, value a business that you're considering purchasing. And it has the impact on the other side, which is how do you prepare and value a business you'd like to sell. Any questions on Studio Tune or business plans right now? If no questions, then we will see you guys on Monday, or at least I will see your names and a few pictures of those of you who have chosen to personalize your Zoom look.